I'm Kevin Davis, and this is the Catholic Family Podcast. And we're joined by an old friend to the show. He's not been on here in a while. It's been so long. He's grown a big bushy beard, and I love it. It makes him look like a rugged tough guy. Stephen Speray over here. I appreciate it. I always love having you on, Stephen. It's always it's full of information and fire, and that's what we appreciate about you. And anyone who's interested in your stuff, are you still right? This is embarrassing to ask you this, but you're still writing over at your website.
Yeah, I throw out an article a month thereabouts.
You're a busy guy. Yeah, I mean, I know right now you don't have a whole lot of time to do much of anything on this side of things, but please go check that out, stephenspray.wordpress.com. Really some of the best. And you've been doing that for how long now? 20, 30 years, right?
Uh,
Long time.
Maybe 2008, 2009, something like that.
Yeah, so approaching 20. There's a lot of stuff up there, a lot of really good material. Highly recommend it. Everyone, please, after you listen to this, go check out stephenspray.wordpress.com. So, Stephen, today we want to talk about something that I admitted to you before the show. It's like I know I've heard these guys' names. I know a little bit about what they discuss and about what they believe, but they jump all over the place. So I can't really follow it. So I don't really try. And that is Salsa and Sisco. And I know they wrote a book a couple years back that was a big thing that it kind of exposed the traditionalists and exposed the traditionalists. And now they've come out with a video with Michael Lofton. I think couple weeks back maybe.
About 10
And
days.
10 days back. So, and we're going to cover a couple of those things, and I'm just going to send it to you pretty much. And so you can kind of rip them to pieces, which I assume is what's going to happen here, because I think knowing these types of people, they set themselves up for it, and you're a good one to do so. So I guess, I don't know if you want to tell us who they are, or at least what are they saying about the traditionalist movement, sede vacantis, etc.
Well, they're saying that we are part of the great apostasy. So, yeah, all of us are part of it. And, never mind that their religion has 70% of the laymen don't even believe in the real presence. Almost none of them believe in purgatory. They all believe that everybody goes to heaven, except for the really, really bad people, like the Hitlers and the Stalins in the world. But everybody else gets to go to heaven, and it really doesn't matter what religion you are. And now you got this new document, Fiducia Supplicans, that's come out, and they don't even have a problem with the document. And Michael Lofton, he claims it's a beautiful document. So we're the great apostasy while they're leading everybody to hell.
I just saw the other day, or heard the other day, that in Italy, something like 7% of Catholics go to normal mass, go to mass on Sundays. In Italy, that just blows my mind. It's like, what's the point anymore? I mean, does the Catholicism of Rome, this modern church, does it even exist really? I mean, how are they making money? I mean, that's part of my question. I mean, how do they still exist if most people don't even go to mass anymore? And I guess it's a whole other question. But again, as you say, I mean, if you're saying your popes right now are not part of the great apostasy, and you're this little growing group of sede vacantis is a part of it, how do they? Where does this come from? I mean, how does that make any sense?
Well, and like in Italy, I think it's mostly the women that go to mass. I think it's the men that don't, and I think that's
Yeah,
the way it's pretty much everywhere. That women are going to mass, but the men aren't. But
it's a whole nother discussion, right? It's a really interesting discussion of how they've made it feminine, right? They've made the entire everything, the service, the liturgy, the sermons, the homilies. They've made everything feminized. They made it so that men don't want to be part of it, which is another very interesting characteristic of the Novus Ordo. Yeah.
well, they right. The thing is with Salza and Cisco is they keep flip flopping. If you looked at them 10 years ago, and then you look at them 5 years ago, and you look at them now, you see they keep changing their position over and over again. So it's hard to really know where exactly they are. It looks like now they're not even the R and R. They're full blown Novus Ordos now.
Mm.
It's what it at least appears. But they were asked point blank by Michael Lofton if Francis professes any heresies, and they said, "Oh no, none." But 2017, I believe it was, Sisco signed that correction document where they accuse Francis of 7 heresies. So, in one document. So,
Interesting.
and I've got Sisco telling me private emails where he privately believes that Francis is an apostate. I don't
Cool.
know. Yeah, they don't seem to think that way anymore. But
So it sounds like I mean, you wonder sometimes with these guys who are are in this crowd of armchair theologians or podcasters or whatever you want to call them. And I mean, the farther that way you go, the more listeners you're going to have, or readers, etc. And well, there's the more people you have, the more of something you're going to get, right? I mean, that being money. Now, I'm not accusing them of that, but you do have to kind of wonder if they're always shifting towards that direction. It could be the
well,
case.
honestly, I think they're shifting in that direction because they know that we've been right all these years. That you can't
Interesting.
resist. That you can't dissent, and they're arguing against dissenting. But that's what they've always been, dissenters. They were part of the SSPX or supported them, and now they realize that we've been right, and they can't beat us in the arguments. Um, we've Mario's done a tremendous job on his website showing all their errors. I try to do what I can. I've gone through their book. I've got 8 or 9 parts where I go through their true or false Pope book and show there's literally an error in every page. It's hard to believe, but you can turn to any page and you'll find an error theologically or misrepresentation or something. Something is wrong on every page. It's hard to believe, but they continue to misrepresent us. I'm in the book like 10 or 15 times. Mario's in it, Father
Wow.
Chicado's in it. And listen, we're very clear about our position, right? And yet they still misrepresent us. They still don't get us right. And if they can't get us right, and we're still alive and we're able to explain our positions, and we do, what are the odds they're going to get Bellarmine right, or Pope
Hmm.
Pius XII right, or any of the past theologians right? Well, they don't. They misrepresent them as well, and they're very good at it. They're good at telling something that to make it look like that we're incorrect on this point or on that point. But
Well, it seems like oftentimes they misrepresent, or they'll put in the first paragraph and then not the second paragraph of Bellarmine, for example. It's like, oh yeah, this is what Bellarmine says, and then literally in the next line it says, "In Father Gabriel Lavery, he said this publicly. That he calls that copy paste theology, and so it's literally just I go in and I cut out this little piece of what somebody said and leave out all the rest, and everyone's just assuming that you're not going to miss the context, or try to deliberately change the context, when of course if they're not doing it deliberately, they're doing it accidentally, and it happens way too often. And it happens in our group too. I'm sure you would agree that it's way too common that people take the easy route, right? They take the little snippets rather than read the entire book of Bellarmine, I suppose, as an example. And but it is to an extreme. So what's an example of what is something that they say that we believe or do that we don't? I mean, do you have anything on the top of your head?
well, I'll give you an example of how they misrepresent a
Sure.
theologian. And Father Layman was one. He lives in the 1700s, I believe the 1700s, and he wrote, and I'm going to quote. I got it right here in front of me, and they've got the quote in their on their website. It says, "But note that although we affirm that the Supreme Pontiff, as a private person, might become a heretic," and then they give an ellipsis. "Nevertheless, for as long as he is tolerated by the Church and publicly recognized as the universal pastor, he is still endowed, in fact, with the pontifical power in such a way that all his decrees have no less force and authority than they would have if he were truly faithful." And anyway, the ellipses, that part that they leave out, and this is the very important part. Here's the ellipses they left out. It says, "And therefore cease to be a true member of the Church, as the Church is the congregation of the faithful. Thus, any heretics, by the very fact they have rejected the true faith of Christ, are neither faithful nor true Christians, according to St. Augustine."
Hmm.
They left out that part, the very part that affirms what we've been saying. And
Right.
so, what Father Layman is getting at, he's getting at that it's possible for the Church to recognize a heretic as Pope, and such a person would not actually be a true Pope. Therefore, the Church would have to supply jurisdiction in such a case.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so and he gets into that, and they of course they leave all that out, like the citation they and it talks about as long as he's left in such an office and is publicly tolerated according to the law of Barbarius of the office of praetor. And what that is, that's an example of Roman history that is it's cited as a first example of supply jurisdiction in common error,
Hmm.
and it becomes part of the law. And so anyway, Father Layman has given an example of, first of all, how the whole church could recognize a heretic as a true pope, but it would not be. So that goes against their universal acceptance theory. And a lot of people believe, I mean, a lot of theologians and canonists and have taught that a peaceful and universal acceptance makes for a true pope. But there are some theologians and canonists that deny that or explain that it's possible for the whole church to recognize a heretic, and thus the church would have to supply jurisdiction for such a case. So that's one example, one of many examples of where they misrepresent a theologian. So actually, Father Layman supports the Sedevacantists position, not their position.
Hmm. It's interesting that they would pick one of those who does support that side when there are probably others who don't. I mean,
There
but
is.
it is
All
one of
of them
those.
support us. In fact,
Yeah,
they all
yeah,
support us.
yeah. And I like Bellarmine too, right? And I think that's another one of those things that again, it's all about how you supply the context, I suppose, and that's the danger, I suppose, of the internet, right? Or okay, they wrote a book, I suppose, but I guess that's the danger of writing a book, on their side. So if it's on the internet, you tweet it, you just kind of figure some people will believe it, most people will forget it. But if you write it in a book, then you have someone like you who can come along, or others, Mario, who will come along and be like, "Oh boy, wait a second, this is that's not how this works." And but it's interesting then that so as you say, they wrote this book, and I remember it being a big deal back 5 years ago or something of the sort. I was on Twitter. I remember when it came out. I remember when it was,
I think
but
it's 2015, so it's almost 10 years
that
ago.
that far. I guess when I first came on Twitter, yeah. But I remember. Okay, I guess I remember it being talked about, and now they're just saying, okay, nah, he's the Pope. That is a pretty big leap, right? I mean, to go from R&R to just accepting. I mean, I mean, in a lot of ways, I think that makes more sense than the R&R, I'm sure you would probably agree. It doesn't make. I mean, he can't be the Pope, so I suppose that's also not sense. But it's an interesting path, I suppose.
Well, remember the R&R is saying we recognize he is the Pope, but we can resist him. So
True.
now they go out of their way to try to explain that Francis hasn't taught any heresy. They understand that popes can't teach heresy. Yet, if you go to the Remnant, there's an old article that Sisco wrote where he accuses Pope Celestine III of promulgating heresy by canon law.
Hmm.
We've taught a heresy on the indissolubility of marriage, and then it was put into canon law. And so he accuses the Catholic Church of promulgating heresy by law. So he seems to be changing his point and realize, hey, you can't. He's never admitted that he's wrong. He's never come out and say, listen, I was just wrong on that point. But it looks like now he's changing his position. Just give him a couple more years and they'll change more. So they flip flop an awful lot. We're like the Catholic Church, right? We don't change our position. We still maintain what we've been saying for the last 20, 30 years, however long any of us have been doing it. I've been wrong about a few points, but there's no problem to say, hey, listen, I was wrong on that point or that point.
I wonder if these guys would come on a debate show or a podcast even with someone like you or Mario, because I doubt it. I mean, I don't think that they would, but it would be interesting because I would wonder, yeah, how do you, what do you say about that? What do you say about the publishing in the Remnant? I mean, how can you defend that? I suppose I assume, as you said, he just doesn't answer it, which is kind of a Bergoglian type of answer. You just don't say anything and hope that people will forget, and they typically do. But I guess if someone actually called them out on it, what what would they say? I wonder. I guess we may probably never
Well,
know.
well, on the Michael Lofton show, when Cisco was on it by himself a good 2 weeks ago, and I was on the chat box, and I used my own name too, by the way, so they know who I was.
Respect.
And I asked the question: does Michael Lofton agree with Cisco that Pope Celestine III taught heresy by law? Does he agree with him? Of course, you know what they do? They censored me. They actually took they And John Salza came on the chat box and he kept asking, "Well, who's your bishop and where's your bishop's at?" And
Can't answer the question.
well, he was asking me the questions, and I was answering all the questions, but
Right.
eventually they just censored me and took me completely off. And you don't see any of my comments, but that's
But
the way.
they never answered your question though.
Well, of course not.
Yeah.
They're not going to, because Michael Lofton's a Pope explainer. I mean, he explains everything away. So if you try to pit him against Sisco, well, there's going to be a problem because Sisco said something different. Now Sisco may have changed his position, but he'd have to admit it if he
Yeah.
were on the show and talk about it. I'll give you another example. It's a recent video that Michael Lofton did. Is the Bishop of Springfield, Illinois. Um, was it Pop Rocky or something like that? He is now saying that President Biden has excommunicated himself automatically for his heresy.
Wow.
But now Salza and Sisco have argued that Biden is a member of the church, and that it takes a declaratory sentence to say he's not a member of the church. They've been arguing for years that the church has to say that someone's not part of the church. There has to be a declaration. And the reason why they say that, because they're trying to argue against the principle that we've been providing, that, listen, you don't need a declaration. It just takes an automatic excommunication for public heresy. And Michael Lofton actually agreed with the bishop that, yes, Biden has automatically excommunicated himself. Interestingly enough, their Pope Francis doesn't believe that Biden has excommunicated himself. So they're not in agreement with their own Pope on who's a member of the church. So you got to remember, their whole idea of what's a member of the church is it's all over the place. Pius XII is pretty clear that you have to only those who profess the Catholic faith, right, and have not been excommunicated or severed themselves, they're a member of the church. Well, Salza and Sisco have been arguing it doesn't matter what you believe. You can believe whatever you want as long as you've not been excommunicated and declared so. You're a member of the church. So this professing the faith is not even, it's not required at all. And of course it's not required because most people in the Novus Ordo religion do not profess the faith at all. Again, they don't believe in purgatory. They don't believe in the real presence. Half of them believe in artificial contraception, and I mean, you go on and on and on with all
Well,
that.
look at Biden and Pelosi. Gee, they vote for like full term abortion, right? At least Pelosi. Biden, I guess I'm not Biden. I can't say, but Pelosi, I'm pretty positive about that. And she had an audience with the Pope. I mean,
Sure.
how can you possibly? I was talking to my wife about that today. I mean, first of all, we have a driving down the road, you pass a Novus Ordo church, and they have this awful art, this flag with art that is as bad as you expect, as it always is with Novus Ordo. And it made me remember that there's a photograph of Bergoglio with I can barely, I seriously don't even want to say it, but it's a unbelievably blasphemous image in the background. Let's just say that. I really don't even want to describe it. It's a horribly, awfully, sinfully blasphemous image of Christ. And there's a picture of Bergoglio in front of it. Now, I'm not saying Bergoglio is posing in front of it, but just, I mean, can you imagine an actual pope doing that? And okay, let's say you make a terrible mistake. You just terrible. The Pope makes a terrible mistake, walks into the wrong office, someone takes a picture, terrible. Wouldn't they at least come out afterwards and be like, "Oh, I can't believe this happened. This is awful. I my deepest apologies, etc." I mean, and I know I know this isn't saying he's not the Pope. I know that's not an argument against that, but it just, some of these things, it just builds so much over time that I just can't even, just common sense wise, it's like, it doesn't make any sense. But why do you think people don't go to church anymore? If your leadership of your church is doing this type of stuff, if you got, you know, gay flag type church banners, okay, I'm not going. That's not Catholic. I'm not going to go to church anymore. It's terrible. It's tragic. And to have people like these guys who just kind of defend it's bizarre almost.
Well, Francis probably likes that picture in the background.
He probably does. I mean, right? I mean, I would kind of assume that. But even if I'm giving him the biggest benefit of the doubt that he hates it, and he can't believe it, you would at least come out afterwards and say, that I can't believe I did that. But of course not. There's no apology. There's no, oh, I shouldn't have done that. He probably supports the artist. I mean, we know this for a fact that he has supported horrible people as artists who produce stuff for the Vatican. I mean, it's beyond belief. And again, it's just, when you have someone like a Pope splainer like Michael Lofton, they'll just come on and be like, they'll just claim, oh, it's ignorance, or oh, how could he? You think he doesn't know? I mean, okay, beforehand, fine, but afterwards, and then you just, yeah, just leave it be.
Well, Lofton would probably, uh, he would say maybe that he's a bad pope. They don't have a problem with saying they're bad popes and they do bad things, because we've had popes do some pretty crazy things and bad things.
True.
So I wouldn't take that away from them. So this, what they do and they're bad. I think they would admit to that, to give them that. But defending fiducia supplicans, listen, if you think that's a beautiful document, I hate to say it, you're probably beyond hope at this point. And
which one is that? I know the name, but I don't know which document that is.
Just the one that blesses sodomites.
Ah, okay, yeah, got it. Yeah, fitting. Yeah.
Now think about Pope Saint Pius V, and his rule on sodomites. To be handed over to the authorities to be burned, and now we're blessing them. So that's you going from one extreme to the other. But that's the Vatican II religion. And you talking about the rainbow flags? Well, I'm here in the Lexington, Kentucky area. We got the biggest LGBTQ bishop in perhaps the entire world, right here, and there's churches with that rainbow flag all over the place. So
crazy.
And then one of the people in the offices, they were congratulated by Francis for his support in that world. So James Martin, he's been praised by Francis as well.
Right.
So,
it's also like, I mean, you go a step farther in Amoris Laetitia, and that's one that we've talked about with Louis Verrecchio, and he really points to that as the worst document that's ever been produced. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I'm pretty sure that's what he said, by the fake Vatican. And again, just kind of saying that sin is subjective in a lot of ways. Just kind of like it's whatever you want it to be. We'll figure it out as we go, which is obviously directly contrary to Catholic teaching. But it actually brings up a good point with Louis Verrecchio. I mean, do you think, again, we don't know the inner thoughts of these guys or their intentions or anything. Obviously, we wouldn't question that. I shouldn't say they're in it for the money. That's kind of a mean thing to say. But it's great to see someone like Louis Verrecchio, who was deep in the Novus Ordo. I mean, he was arguing for Vatican II. Like, he was one of the top experts in the world of Vatican II on the pro Vatican II side, and eventually he went so deep it was like, oh, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. And now he's he is a Theta Vacantis. And do you think that's something that maybe are they possibly going that direction? Maybe they see, okay, R&R, as you said, doesn't work. This doesn't make any sense. Like, you can't just say he's a pope, but we don't follow him. Maybe they're heading in the right direction slowly.
No, they're going in the other direction. So they are. They've already made up their minds that Francis is the Pope. For them, it's a dogmatic fact. It's a de fide. He's the Pope, and there's nothing that can be done about it. And we've got to accept it. And everybody that says that he's not the Pope, well, we're the great apostasy. We're part of the. We're getting ready for Antichrist to come. And I mean, they've labeled us in that video as Calvinists. So Calvinists say all you got to do is believe in the faith, and you're part of the church. Well, we don't believe that. All you got to do is profess the faith. Obviously, we believe we've got to be in union with the papacy. We believe that you got to be in union with the papacy. We just don't believe that Francis is the Pope.
Right.
Yeah, you got to be in union with the papacy and all the teachings of the church. And so, again, there's another misrepresentation of our position. They misrepresented our position. I'll give you another example that just comes to mind is Nestorius. They brought up Nestorius a couple of times. And they think, we argued that Nestorius lost his office, lost his jurisdiction immediately after he professed his heresy. And they said, well, no, look, if you look at history, it was 3 years later when he was deposed, right? So, and it was 3 years later. That's the punishment of the church. And I've sent this quote in an open email to Robert Sisco, and I'm going to quote, I got it here in front of me. It comes from Cardinal Bio, and it was the argument that I made even before I saw Cardinal Bio. But here's what he says. He says, This is Pope Celestine. He's talking about Pope Celestine. See also Epistle 12 of the same Celestine to John to Antioch. If anyone was excommunicated or cast out from episcopal or clerical dignity by the bishop Nestorius or those who follow him, from the time they began to preach such things, it is clear that such a one has been and remains in our communion, etc. Thus you see, unquote. Thus you see that a bishop who is an occult heretic still has the power of binding and loosening, giving that only from that time at which he begins to openly preach heresy, he loses episcopal jurisdiction and power of excommunicating. Thus the conclusion is clear, for he who is not in the church cannot have authority in the church. And an occult heretic can have it. In fact, at times does indeed have it. Clearly, it follows that an occult heretic is not yet cut off from the body of the church. So here we have Cardinal Bio, who was a top theologian in First Vatican Council, and he's explaining how Nestorius lost his jurisdiction. Okay, it didn't happen. It didn't happen 3 years after he was deposed by the Pope. And also, another point is Pope Pius VI called Nestorius an impostor in the document Auctorem Fidei. By the way, it was Auctorem Fidei. That was the document that made me become a sedevacantist, actually. But Nestorius, when was Nestorius an impostor? Obviously, it wasn't after, he was deposed. It was between those 3 years. See, and if he's an impostor, then what is he? He's not an actual archbishop or a patriarch. And that's the point that we make. We're saying that the Vatican II popes are imposters. They're not true. And Nestorius is a good example. And we have Pius VI saying so, that he's an impostor. And then we got Cardinal Bio explaining how Pope Saint Celestine, by the way, who's saying that he didn't have any power. He lost his episcopal jurisdiction and the power of excommunicating. And there's you another example. And they think they've got us on Nestorius. And it's clear that, no, we're right about Nestorius. But even though Sisco saw that quote from Cardinal Bio, he continued on that program of Michael Lofton and said that we're wrong. Just ignored what Bio said. But that's what they do. They ignore the experts that show.
So in the end, they pretty much they say Pope is the Pope no matter what until he is deposed. Right? I mean, it cannot happen any other way. But that can then only happen from a true Pope, right? Because no one can judge the papacy except for the papacy. Is that right, or am I misconstruing that?
I wouldn't even say. Well, it's funny that you bring that up because in a recent email with Dr. Robertson Jennings, who I like very much, he says it's going to take a future Pope to say that Francis is not a Pope. And I replied back, so you need a future Pope to tell you that we're right now. So that's right. So besides, you can't appeal, you can't reject and then appeal to something in the future or someone. Right. But they're not actually doing that, though. They are saying that he's the Pope. But even a future, if it's a dogmatic fact, and that's what they're arguing, that he's the Pope, then a future Pope can't change a dogmatic fact. It's a fact is a fact. So he's the Pope regardless. Not even a future Pope could do anything about it.
And so do they really believe that to any point? I mean, it's just he is the Pope no matter. I mean, really, what if he just says the Catholic Church doesn't exist? Jesus Christ never lived. It's whatever, whatever. Because what else? I don't know what else they could say past what they've already said. I mean, sin is subjective. I mean, yikes! How do you get worse? So let's say, no, actually, Christ was made up. It's a fairy tale. And he teaches that. He teaches. Let's say they would probably only say if he says that ex cathedra, right? Because that's when he could actually be. Is that right? Because he can't fail ex cathedra. So if he stands on the throne of St. Peter and then says it, maybe then they would admit that he's not the Pope. But if he says it any other time, they would find some excuse or just say, yeah, he's got to be deposed.
They probably would say that he could never do that. He could never do anything like that. Although they've already done those type of things.
Completely. Yeah.
Right. But
hell is empty. Sin is subjective. I mean,
they keep moving the bar, right? They keep moving that bar and crossing that line. And every time their Vatican II Pope crosses that line, they keep explaining it away. Well, if he says this, and then he does, and if he says this, and so I don't think it really matters. They're going to explain it away. Listen, the death penalty is pretty clear. I thought that the whole saying that it's contrary to the dignity of the human person, right? They're not saying it exactly, but they are saying, or explicitly, they are saying it's intrinsically evil if it's contrary. Right. So if that's the case, then you have a perfect example of modernism. At one time it wasn't, and now that it is. So true changes. And there's a real good example of modernism is the death penalty. I've heard Patrick Madrid on the radio say, well, they're not saying it's intrinsically evil, just a pastoral. Well, yes, they are arguing that point. But again, he can't say that because he knows what it means. So,
well, it seems like it's got to be brutal being in their shoes, because you're constantly having to make excuses for the Pope, who of course is the one who we should be taking our entire basis of faith from. He is the mouthpiece of Christ on earth. He's the one we should be following, and their entire job almost is to explain away the things that he says that are heretical. Or so it's like, either they're con men, which I think some of them are. I'm not saying these two, but I think some of them are just purely con men. They're just they study it and then they just say the things that works for the time. And I think others are obviously, they do want to be Catholic. They do want to find the truth, but they're just stuck in this rut of they can't get past it. They can't get past the idea that he has to be the Pope because he has to, and because part of it, some of them, is because I can never be a sede vacantis, so he has to be the Pope, and I think that's sometimes the saddest for me.
I think that if I were to play devil's advocate and give them the benefit of the doubt, I think their biggest obstacle is the structure of the church. So our position is it's brutal, right? The structures, like where are the bishops? Where's the Pope? Who are the bishops that hold office? And we can't point to anybody holding office anywhere in the entire world, right? So from all appearances, it looks like there's no hierarchy in that sense. And so they believe there's got to be a hierarchy. There's got to be, because that is the common opinion of theologians, that there will always be a hierarchy. And I actually agree. There has to be a hierarchy if you don't have what we have. I don't think they thought of this position that we got. We do got bishops, and then they never give that example of what we have today. But if we didn't have what we had today, then obviously you'd have to have a hierarchy. There's got to be at least the potential of getting a pope. Without any bishops at all, then you got a problem.
Right.
But they see that, and that's the argument they always come after with us, right? Where's your bishop? Who are you with? And where's the hierarchy? And if you don't follow the hierarchy, and it looks like that we're doing what all the Protestants did or what have you. But the difference is that the Vatican II hierarchy and the Pope, of course, being the head, they're actually promoting the apostasy. They're promoting Protestantism. They say we're the Protestants, but they're the ones celebrating Protestantism, right?
The Catholic Church, the Roman Church, the Novus Ordo, they had stamps of Martin Luther back, what was it, 5 or 6 years ago? They had busts. I walked into a Novus Ordo church in my wife's hometown just to see the atrocity that it is, and they had a huge life-size bust of Luther, and in German it said "one of us."
Right.
That's what it said, Steve. They are saying that Luther is one of them, so they are one with the Protestants, and so it's just such an ironic, it's ridiculous comment that these guys call us Protestants, but as you said, their own hierarchy is one with the Protestants,
right?
At least the marketing side.
They admitted that the Protestantism was the precursor to the Great Apostasy, which even Pius XI said that was the beginning of the Great Apostasy, was the Protestantism. So they Salza and Sisco admitted that point, but their Vatican, not only they released that stamp in honor of Martin Luther, right? You got John Paul II in '83. He goes into a Lutheran church, right, and celebrated the 500th anniversary of Luther's birth in his honor. In 2010, you had in the same church, in the same Lutheran church, you had Benedict XVI, who preached on the anniversary of the joint declaration of justification with Luther's heresy, right? If you go to 2011, you got Benedict XVI. He presented Martin Luther as a model for Catholics when he met with the Lutheran Council in Germany. He bowed towards their altar. They don't have a valid Eucharist, but he bows and he prayed alongside a woman bishop. You had the Vatican that claimed that Martin Luther was a witness of the gospel. You got Francis, who celebrated the Protestant revolt with the Lutherans in 2016. I mean, I can go on. It's nonstop promotion of Protestant worship, and of course the Novus Ordo Mass. It's an imitation of Luther and Cranmer's Mass. It is.
Right.
They asked for 6 Protestants to help, put their input on the new Mass.
And you can see it. You can see it. I mean, if you go to a Novus Ordo Mass now, I've been unfortunate enough to travel in Europe to visit, cathedrals and whatnot. I've seen it. I've seen parts of a couple, and I think anyone would agree with me that it is something that if I walked in and I didn't know what kind of a church it was, I would not know it was Catholic. I mean, just because obviously I grew up with the traditional Latin Mass, I know what the faith was, I know what the liturgy was, and if I just walked into a church and saw the Novus Ordo, I truly would not guess it was Catholic. I don't think I'm just saying that biasedly. It doesn't look the same. It looks very different. I mean, it looks much more Protestant, and now you have all the colors, and you have people wearing like rainbow vestments and stuff. I mean, it's so crazy. So they always ask us, okay, where's your bishop? It's like, okay, so is your bishop in Lexington, Kentucky? How do you feel about that? And how's your hierarchy doing, guys? I mean, it just blows my mind that they're always asking us where our hierarchy is. And yeah, you're right. It is a bad position that I don't like. Nobody likes it. It is a terrible position. We don't have a pope. We don't have a hierarchy. But we also don't have a hierarchy of the church that allows gay bishops in Lexington, Kentucky. I mean, which is worse? Blows my mind.
He was handpicked too, by the way.
Oh.
So I'll bring up another point. I heard Patrick Madrid. This is this past week. So, lady asked him a question: whether a priest could celebrate a Protestant service or celebrate another service, and Patrick Madrid said absolutely not. You can only do the Mass and one of the Catholic services, but you can't participate or fill in or anything like for. And yet, I was going to call on the show, but I never have time. Then they never put me on anyway. But hey, his Pope Francis has done that, has led Protestant services and brags about it. He's done Pentecostals, Presbyterians. I'm not sure of the other ones, but he's done a few. So the very thing that Madrid said can't be done, his Pope has done and brags about it. So just to give you another example, oneness in faith. One thing for sure is the Vatican II religion is not one in faith. They are all over the place. Lofton doesn't even agree with Sisco on points. They don't agree with their Pope on points. They all disagree with each other over not just opinions, which you can disagree with, but they disagree with each other on moral issues. They disagree with doctrinal issues that you cannot be disunited. You have to be united in faith. And they're a perfect example of why they are not the Catholic Church, because the first mark of the church is oneness in faith. They are not one in faith. And again, they cite how we've gone away and revolted and done our own thing, and we're holding to the faith exactly as it was, and we're all united. We're united in faith, but they are not united in faith, and they have a pope. The whole idea behind having a pope is to be united in faith, and yet they have one, and yet they're still not united. So there's a really good example. And then they have the holiness of the church, which that includes all the practices. So you have this new document, Fiducia Supplicans, but they argue that there's nothing wrong with it, and Lofton says it's a beautiful document. But the local Lexington diocese here, their local canon lawyer, she argues that Fiducia Supplicans is evil, and then she uses canon law, because she's a canon lawyer, to say that by canon law you have a right and a duty to reject that document and to not follow it.
Whoa.
Again, oneness of faith.
Can you imagine being part of it? It's heartbreaking. That has got to be the worst possible thing to be a member of the Novus Ordo, because what are you supposed to do? And it's so confusing. And again, you look at the R&R movement. You look at all these different things, and it brings to mind when I did a show with Mario about a video by Michael Matt. He was at a conference, a year ago or so, and and he's banging the table, Michael Matt of the Remnant, and just energetic and on fire, and we have to fight Bergoglio tooth and nail every inch of the way. And he didn't say we need to pray for his sins. He's a sinful man. He has his failings, but we need to pray that he gets better. No, he is saying we have to fight him in matters of faith. I mean, and then he's like, but he's the Pope. It's just, I mean, sometimes you just can't. I don't get it. It just doesn't compute.
Well, you've been arguing with us for so many years. I think that's some humble pie you have to eat when you say that we've been right. And the funny thing is, like I said, they have been admitting that we've been right. They're arguing in our behalf that you can't dissent. So they're starting to see that you can't dissent. You have to follow what the church teaches and what the Pope teaches, and you can't call these documents heretical, even though at one point they were doing that. Sisco was signing documents he had putting his signatures on these corrections saying, hey, this document teaches heresy. So 7 heresies in one document. And now he says
Dubia?
not taught heresy. What's that?
Was that the Dubia? Was that the famous?
Right, the filial correction.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Go on to see all the signatures. Salza didn't put his signature on it, but Sisco's got his.
Interesting.
So, they claim, another thing is they claim what we say has happened can't happen. That the visible church, it's going to be visible, the structure, it's going to be everywhere, and you're going to see it, and that what we're saying is actually heretical. But they completely ignore Cardinal Manning, who clearly says what we're saying, that the church is going to, it's going to disappear, you might say. It says it appears to. I got the quote in front of me. He says this: "For a time, it shall be swept, as it were, from the face of the earth." It's going to be driven underground, and he talks about the city of Rome and the destruction of Antichrist, and he says that Rome shall apostatize from the faith and drive away the vicar of Christ and return to its ancient paganism. And what is Rome doing now? They're the Pachamama and all this paganism that you see going on, the very thing that all the early church fathers, and by the way, it's the universal testimony of the early church fathers that said all these things, by the way.
Yeah.
You also have Our Lady of Good Success. She says that the church will go through a dark night without a prelate and follower to watch over it. Right? So you have Father Sylvester Berry. He says this: "It is a matter of history that the most disastrous periods for the church were times when the papal throne was vacant, or when the anti-popes contended with the legitimate head of the church. Thus also shall it be in those evil days to come. Wow. The church, deprived of her chief pastor, must seek sanctuary and solitude, there to be guided by God himself during those trying days." Be guided by God himself, not by bishops. Not by you. He's talking about God. It's going to be so bad. So these things that we're saying, we have theologians, they're saying the same thing, and they're saying what we're saying is heresy. So you'd have to say Manning's preaching heresy, Barry's preaching heresy, right? So
yeah,
we got theologians on our side.
Absolutely. Well, and I think again, even common sense and understanding that, yeah, we first of all, we can't disobey the Pope. If he's the Pope, then you have to listen to him, and then just being able to look and see, if the house is burning, I can't just sit here, and it's clear the house is burning. I mean, God gives us sense too. I mean, it's something that I think Mario mentioned in a show we just recorded. He's like, that the spirit of the law trumps the letter of the law. I mean, and I think that to me makes a lot of sense. It's like God gives us sense as well as the church and as well as the Pope. He also gives us the intelligence or the intellect. Not everyone, I suppose, but we can be able to see when this can't be. And I think that if more people had seen that back in the 1960s, maybe we wouldn't have had this mess. But I think people were maybe not quite able to, I don't know, use their own sense. They were too attached to the letter and not enough to the spirit. And I know that's easy to say now in hindsight, obviously, but I think that that's something too that, again, it just, I don't know. I was born sede vacantis. I know it's easy for me to say that. I go and I see an art project from the Novus Ordo that's blasphemous, and I just think there's no way. There's just. I mean, how could that possibly happen with a real church? I don't understand it. I just common sense. And again, I think 90% of people in Italy do too, and I think 95% of people in America, however many it is, they understand what this was going on right now. It's certainly not worth my time to go to mass. It's not worth my time to learn about Christ and the saints and Mary, etc. It's just, and most likely it's not worth my time to be Catholic, except for possibly a name. And it's a tragic.
People are leaving and they're going to the Eastern Orthodox too. So I just watched
Yeah.
a video today of a man who said Michael Lofton helped him become an Eastern Orthodox. And what's interesting is that by becoming an Eastern Orthodox, you've actually gotten closer to the Catholic Church than Novus Ordo.
Yeah.
You're
True.
actually closer to the truth being Eastern Orthodox than you are if you're in the Novus Ordo religion. They're that far gone. They don't even have valid sacraments. The Easterns, they do have valid sacraments. So they're getting closer to the tradition. They're getting closer to the truth. They have fewer heresies. So by becoming Eastern Orthodox, they're becoming closer to the Catholic Church than they were when they were in the Novus Ordo. That's
wild.
That's astounding when you think about it. That's how far gone the Vatican II religion is. And the fact that you got people defending it as the true church, the Catholic Church, it's beyond me.
Well, that's why I appreciate people like you and Mario and Introibo, others who are out there calling people out on it, calling out Salza and Sisco, because I think that's honestly what it does help. I think because I think if they just remain unchallenged, if it's just, especially putting your name to it, I really appreciate that. If you're on these comment sections and you're Joe Smith 281 and you're saying these things, I mean, it just doesn't have the same impact as if you're saying, hey, this is Stephen Speray, and this is what I have to say about it. And I think that really matters. And I think that's something that I think, I appreciate. I know you don't have much time. And if the time you have is spent defending the faith and in trying to educate people and really, just fighting back against this silliness almost of what they're putting out there, I think that's absolutely worthwhile, and I greatly appreciate you coming on and doing just that. And I hope, if we put out a title that says, the errors of Salza and Sisco, whatever we're going to call it, hopefully people will look at that, or they, oh, okay, this is interesting, and they'll look into it, and then maybe they'll go and look at your website, and then Mario's, and if it's one person we change, that's definitely a big win, and I know that's why you're in it. I know that's why I'm in it. Mario's in it, and one person at a time that wakes up and says, okay, something's desperately wrong, and I'm sure you've seen it now, really, especially since COVID. There's a lot of people starting to say, wait a minute, okay, something's really wrong here, and I think that's heartening.
Yeah, and I can tell you this: it's all about salvation in the end, right? Getting to heaven. We've got to get the truth out there. Listen, I just had two loved ones pass away within the last 8 months. A very close family member died this past Wednesday, and I made sure that she got the last sacrament. And what a powerful sacrament that is. And I was thinking, would you risk your soul for the anointing of the sick of the Vatican II religion? Have you seen the sacrament? Have you seen what they've done to it?
I actually haven't, no.
Well, I've done an article on it. So go to my website and hit Extreme
Okay.
Unction.
Got it.
And it's sad. And I sure wouldn't want to put my trust my eternal soul, for the sacrament that they've demolished. They've taken away all the good stuff out of it and made it into a happy go blessing. It's pathetic, really. And again, the apostasy, it's facilitated by the Vatican II popes, by the religion. It's not just the Vatican II popes; it's the entire religion, right? You got a religion with sacraments that aren't valid; they're doubtful. You got the majority of the people in the Novus Ordo religion that don't even believe. They don't even think you have to believe. Nothing is said. Nothing is done. The man who's leading it he says everything under the sun, and you can't. And he says things. Some things he'll say sound orthodox. It sounds right, and then he'll say things that you just can't believe he said. Even and so you have to realize that a true pope in the Catholic faith is leading people to heaven, and then the bottom line is getting people to heaven. So anything that it distracts you from that, then it's obviously not Catholic. Bottom line is salvation, getting to heaven, and they're doing the exact opposite. They're bringing people to hell. They're getting people to leave the faith, to not believe correctly, and then you got like Salza and Sisco and Lofton. They're helping people stay in the apostasy or leave for other religions like the Eastern Orthodox, which is also part of the apostasy, and the Protestantism. That's all part. It's all part of the apostasy. They're all going against the faith. They're all going against Christ ultimately in the end. And to say that Francis is the Pope and that those who say otherwise is the apostasy, that's insane. And but
Fitting.
don't agree with their own pope because their own pope says we're part of the church. Their own pope says that we're part of the church.
Does he? He says that the trads are that's surprising.
State of a
Yeah,
conscious are mushrooms in the church, sad mushrooms in the church. That's what we are.
true. He did say in the church. That's a good point. I just remember the mushrooms part, but he did say in the church. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, all right. Well then I guess we're brethren with the Protestants after all. And what more could we ask for?
So what's the point of joining them if their religion already says we're okay? And
Right?
and that goes with all the other religions. Why would you stay in? People they like the tradition, so they join the Eastern Orthodox. They like those
Yeah.
traditions, so they. But what are those Eastern Orthodox? They hobnob with the Vatican,
Right.
right? They're at the sissy events. The leaders of those patriarchs are at the sissy events.
Yeah.
They're doing the very same things. So if you join the Eastern Orthodox, you're not getting any. You might be getting a little closer because you have valid sacraments, but you're
Right.
still part of the apostasy. You're still part of the problem.
Well, which one is it that says that the Catholic Church is the privileged way to heaven? It's one of the Vatican II documents. It's not the only way; it's the privileged way. So, but it's a great point. So it's like if that's the case, and if you can get to heaven as a Protestant, and I'm really sick of my wife and I want to get divorced, okay, well, I can still get to heaven by leaving the Catholic faith and getting divorced as a Protestant. What's the point, Steve? It's just
Mm.
again, it all loses everything. If you start saying it's all good, everything's fine, there's no hell, there's sin is subjective. I mean, it's despairing. I mean, because eventually your life, your morality, your drive to heaven, which good people have, I truly believe that. What's it based on? It used to be based on a very firm law given to us by God and then by the church, through God, of course. And now it's gone. All of that's gone. There is no basis. Now it's just kind of okay. Yeah, as you said, there's no unity. So okay, what does this priest say, or this bishop say, or this pope, I suppose? And it's that can't be, and it's terribly tragic because again, I think it's not freeing. This is not. It's not like this nice. Oh la la la. We knew what. No, because for the good people who actually want salvation, they want to be guided, not to be given an open way. Because I think people deep down know that that can't be true.
And one last thing that I want to mention: if we're in the great apostasy, which they admit that we are, one thing is the great apostasy coincides with the Antichrist. It's when our Lord comes back, and what's it going to be like? Well, it's going to be like the days of Noah, right? So it's going to be a small number of people that have the faith, right? And we are a small number, and I don't know what the numbers were in Noah's day, how many people were in the world, but only
Hmm.
8 survived, right? But I don't
Right.
know how. But we got 8 billion people. I don't think there was even anywhere close to that.
Doubt
I,
it.
I would I would suspect that the ratio of the people in Noah's Ark to the people around is very close to what we are with the number of people today. I would suspect that. So we
Could
are
be.
we are a remnant, and we fulfill the idea that the apostasy is now. If we're the great apostasy and we're just a small number, well, that doesn't make sense, right?
Right.
Um,
Good point. Well,
I
and
mean,
as you said though, I mean, in the end, we can all be part of this, this select group, I suppose. But if we sin and lose our souls, then it ain't going to matter either. So I mean, that exactly as you said earlier, that's the point. Save your souls, go to heaven, and but teach the truth. That's part of it too, of course. I mean, and because we understand that you can only go to heaven as a Catholic. And if that's the case, then we want everyone to become Catholic. That's absolutely true. I don't want Salsa and Sisco or my next door neighbor or people I don't like. I don't want them to go to hell, obviously. And I mean, nobody, you don't, nobody does. So that's the point. That's why we want to try to.
We want them to be Catholic, and we want.
Yeah, it's it.
Well, I'd love to see Salza and Sisco and Lofton and Madrid
Oh,
and all these guys say, "Listen, you know something? We think you're right. We're sorry. We were wrong, and we would love to. We're not going to ridicule them and get on them, and we're going to welcome them, and that's what we want. We want everybody to become Catholic because
totally.
your salvation it's on the line. And just being Catholic doesn't get you to heaven.
No,
I mean,
no.
you got to stay away from mortal sin, and you've seen the fewness of the saved. Most Catholics go to hell.
Yeah.
So, and if most Catholics go to hell, what does it say for the rest of the world?
Whew, scary
Yeah.
thought. Well, on that happy note, Steve. but no, seriously though, I really do greatly appreciate it, and absolutely. Let's pray. Let's pray for everyone too. Let's pray for Salsa and Cisco and the people that they have an influence on, and for Lofton and for Bergoglio, but also, and I think that's a really important thing too, to pray for a true pope. However that's going to come, however you believe it, if it's through the thesis, if it's through conclavism, in the end, it doesn't really matter. We're going to need a miracle to have a pope. That's just how it is. Some sort of miracle is going to happen to bring us a pope. So let's pray for that. Let's pray that it comes in God's good time and that perhaps we get to see it. And if we're going to see it, we definitely have to do our part, get to heaven ourselves, but also be good, responsible Catholics that help lead other people in that way. Because if a miracle happens and we finally have some solution for a pope, if we're not unified, if we're not good, then yeah, again, I don't think it's going to happen. Maybe it'll be the next generation that'll get a chance. I don't know. We'll have to see. But anyway, let's do our best, be charitable, and let's pray for these confused men who we want definitely to come back to the fold for sure. Steve Speray, I greatly appreciate it. Everyone, please go again, check out the pod or the website. I'm definitely going to go check out the Extreme Unction. That sounds really interesting. Maybe with your permission, maybe I'll read it for a podcast, put it up on an audio, because that sounds interesting. It's one of those things that I think that type of thing is really a great example that sometimes just clicks with people. It's like, wait, they did what? They changed what? Yeah, and I think that can help just to give you the black and white. Here's what it was. Here's what it is. Can that still be Catholic? And I think that's a great way to do it. So I appreciate the work that you do. And I appreciate you coming on. And I know you're busy. You're a busy man, especially in the summertime. But hopefully we'll have you on again sometime soon. And maybe it's with some other crazy scandal with Lofton or Madrid or one of these guys who tend to put their foot in their mouth. I also have to say at last, I would love to hear you call into a radio show. So if you ever do, please record it. If they ever put you on, I think you may have to fake your voice and just say, "Hey, I'm Steve." Kind of give a high voice or something so they can't tell it's you, because they're never going to put Steve Speray on a radio show. But you can keep trying. I definitely appreciate it. Anyway, Steve, until next time, God bless you.
You too.